Welcome, pudding people, to another episode of Everybody Loves Pudding. We are your hosts, Ken Seymour and Richard Geiger. We are excited. It's a good day. It's a good evening. It's a day of revelry in geekdom. We have an amazing guest, Richard.
Amazing. Somebody that you've known for quite some time.
Yes. I don't like to sometimes think about how long that period of time is, because then it makes me remember that I'm old. But
We're old.
This gentleman has been a member of a variety of improv troupes. He's done some acting. He's done some writing. He's a man of many talents, the incredible Leonard Pigg. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Now, you're actually, you were, at least the last time we talked, you were in the middle of shooting something right now, right?
Yeah, there's a series, it's called Canary Currency, and it's on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. It's actually being filmed in Kokomo, Indianapolis, and a couple of the surrounding areas. And I play a character named Slug, and he's an interesting side character in so much as there's certain ambivalence about him. Like, he runs with a lot of criminals, and it makes you wonder, because like when they first introduce him, he's working in a comic shop, which is actually a hideout for one of the characters. But the gist of that series is basically like, you've got a heist going wrong, and one of these guys decides to rat out the other and to solve his problems, and he doesn't anticipate the guy breaking out of prison to get revenge. So it just sort of evolves from there, and it's very I think dark and gritty is overused, but it definitely has sort of a street flavor, and it's got some interesting elements in it, because from what some of the people I've talked to that have seen the series, one of the things they're not sure who to root for. Do you root for the guy that broke out? Do you root for the guy that ratted? It's like, I guess it all just depends on your sensibilities. So it kind of has a certain an ambivalence, I guess. And they're actually going to be doing a spinoff called Sean and Smoke, and I'm going to be in that as well.
Nice. Is that so? You say it's filmed in Kokomo and Indy. Is
Right.
the base of the show, like, does it say, hey, these people are from Indiana, or is it just filmed in those locations?
No, I mean, there are a couple of times I think they make mention of it. There's not a lot, but like some of the locales, I mean, some of the bars, some of the scenery, like you'll see a welcome to Kokomo sign, you'll see, like I said, certain landmarks that if you're aware, you'll realize it. I mean, that's not like the big focus of it. It's very character driven, and the episodes are relatively short. So if you don't have a huge attention span, you can end up just going on Amazon and blazing through an entire season.
That's actually a kind of a nice thing. As much as I enjoy something with some meat to it, movies that are 2+ hours or shows that are at least an hour an episode, it is nice to have something that you can enjoy in spare moments, because if the listeners are anything like those of us that are recording at the moment, sometimes spare moments is all we get.
Yeah, the one of the other strange things I've kind of noticed with the series, like I said, you don't know who to root for. I mean, even the cops, like if you got a cop that's on the take, you've got all these people that are just sort of picking sides. I've been having fun being a part of it, because it's sometimes like the scenes might end up changing if somebody's not available. Next thing, I have to switch things around, and one person might end up doing something else. Like during some of the filming, I guess it was last year, I was sick. I was like sick as a dog, so they had to modify a couple of scenes, and I think it still makes for interesting storytelling. It's cool that they're able to be that quick on their feet to kind of go, all right, well, we'll just switch it up. We'll have this guy do this instead, and still keep the ball rolling.
Are they trying to do the entire season, as it were, in a short period of time, or are they trying to stretch it out and allow for that kind of flexibility for adjustment over time?
Well, there's quite a few of the folks that in the cast that have like factory jobs and that are doing other things. So they've been really good about keeping that in mind. And so They'll try to let people know a few weeks in advance, hey, we're going to be filming on this day at this time, would you be available? Okay, cool. And then they'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, we wouldn't know anything about having a day job when we're doing this.
Ugh, gross. Can you do this on 1 week notice? No.
No, like it's
So how did you get caught up doing this particular series or anything kind of related to this series?
well, some of the guys behind the production, Derek Flagger, Kane Marco, Brian Foster, they all, I know, well, he's a rapper, that's his rap name. But it's spelled different. It's like KCANE MARKKCO. So but yeah, the Juggernaut though. He's got a Juggernaut tattoo, oddly enough. Well, you'd almost have to, right? But they knew that I was an actor, and a few times they were doing some music videos in town, and they needed some people. And I've known Kane for years, probably since maybe 2012, 2011. So he knew that I was always working on projects here and there, if it wasn't me writing something or acting in some indie films, because every now and again, it's like I was doing the occasional short film in Indianapolis, or people I knew that are filmmakers that it becomes sort of an insulated group to a certain extent. You're kind of like, man, I need somebody on the fly, or we need somebody to do this or that, and I didn't expect my part to evolve the way it did, but the production kind of changed because of COVID. Initially it was just supposed to be a film, and before that it was just a series of music videos. There were at least 2 or 3 music videos that kind of play out the sort of beginnings of the story, and in one of the videos you see the heist and you see all the craziness go wrong, and I was in one of the music videos, but I wasn't necessarily a character yet. Although if you look at it's called No Shame. It's one of Kane Marco's songs. And in the video, you'll see me dancing in this club, and I've got on like a Shazam t-shirt. And so the funny thing is, it's like when they started to flesh this story out and decide to, really move forward with it, it fit the character, because here it was, I was working in a comic shop. So like they were using there's a shop in Kokomo called Paradigm Comics Cafe, and they had made arrangements to have a lot of scenes filmed there. So I got in on the action, and just, I end up basically, it's like I was a background character, then all of a sudden I'm kind of been moving closer to the forefront along the way.
That sure brings up an excellent question that we've talked about on occasion.
Mhm.
Are you a person, since we're all comic nerds talking right now,
Yeah.
are you a person that's like, oh, Shazam, okay, he's Shazam, or no, he's Captain Marvel, I don't care if you change his name, he is always Captain Marvel? Which camp are you in?
I am the Captain Marvel camp. Nothing against Carol Danvers, formerly known as Ms. Marvel, but
Right.
Captain Marvel it was Adventures of Captain Marvel in the old serials, the old black and whites back in the day.
Yes,
They only started calling it Shazam because of that whole I don't know, like Marvel and DC were kind of going at each other. It was like the Wonder Woman thing. Like
yeah.
you had the Wonder Woman property, and then Marvel came out with a Wonder Man character.
Mhm.
And so I feel like the whole Captain Marvel thing, they kind of jumped in, I think, right when the licensing to it was like lapsing, because it was with was it Charleston Comics, I think.
I think so, originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about on a couple of occasions. I grew up with it being Captain Marvel, and I understand the need for the change, but
Mhm.
I can't call him Shazam. You're going to change his name to what he says. That's like, just a little weird. Just a little weird.
Why can't they all just be Captain Marvel?
Right.
So there's a lot of them. Well, there's a whole family.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel and DC both have a character called the Scarecrow.
Right. And
you've never seen them get into it over that.
No.
I mean, they both have all kinds of just different folks. I mean, even I was writing some short fiction for Amos Cola, which used to be called Amos Magazine. And one of the characters I used, Hugo Danner. He was actually in the second issue of The Six Emperors that I wrote. with James McCord, and that was a character from Public Domain. The interesting thing about him is he's been in both universes. Marvel Premiere, I think, first debuted him, and they named the title Man God. It was based on the novel. I think it was Philip. I want to say it was Philip Roth, maybe. But
sure on that one.
I'm gonna have to double check on that. But anyway, this character, he was kind of like the Superman prototype. So Marvel released like a series of stories with him as Man God, and I don't think because the book was originally Philip Wiley. The book was called Gladiator originally, and anyway, Marvel had released it, and they had like these beautiful painted covers with that look like the pulp era, and you had the guy in like the rider pants and the boots and the big massive muscles, and it said Man God, and I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. And that was Hugo Danner. And then I believe they used him in I think it was, if it wasn't All-Star Squadron, it might have been the Young All-Stars, but it was one of those teams that was at least around the time of the JSA. They were sort of fluidic, like you had the squadron and the society, and they kind of just as society characters, like they'd go back and forth between these groups. And Hugo Danner was the father of a character named Iron Monroe, who's actually still a DC character. They just haven't really done anything with him in a long time, but that was part of his origin, his mythology. He was the son of Hugo Danner, so he inherited these powers. So it's just interesting to see, like, you've got some characters that just kind of seep back and forth, and some of those are public domain. I mean, if you look at the Shadow, like Marvel was putting out Shadow comics once upon a time, and DC was doing it. It's just whoever has the rights. I mean, same thing with like Conan the Barbarian.
And stuff that nobody could lay claim to. I mean, Thor has been in both DC and Marvel. Obviously, everybody thinks of the Marvel Thor, but all of the gods from the mythologies have made appearances across the different comics over the years. Yeah. So it's it makes it kind of interesting. Or you get those really weird instances like when they do the crossovers between companies, like the Avengers versus the JLA, and they bring in a character in that story that ends up being super important in DC storylines for years after that.
Yeah.
It's kind of pretty funny. So is it your love of comics that got you into the wanting to write them down the line?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's always been one of those things. It's like when you're a kid, and I remember when they used to have the spinner racks at the drugstore, and you go grab a couple comics, and you and your friends would look through it. Like we used to get, I remember I used to get those Marvel handbooks, like the official handbook of the Marvel universe or the DC Who's Who, and would leaf through that and go, all right, well, which character do you want to be? Because we have their origin, they have their powers and all this kind of stuff, and what they're capable of, and you just kind of bloom. Next thing you and your friends are playing, like, it's like, oh, he wants to be Silver Surfer. Oh, he wants to be Spider-Man. Well, he wants to be Sin Eater. All right, well, I guess we're playing. And you get like these kooky mashups. I mean, even I remember being in kindergarten, and there was an older kid. He used to always have those DC Digest. Do you remember those? Like the blue ribbons? They were like the size of a TV guide. And he'd be looking through them, and we'd all be out, I would ask him questions. And he was the guy, he was like more of a comic aficionado than I was at that point. So it's like anything I would ask him, he would answer like one word sentence, or just like, oh, how'd the Fantastic Four get their powers? Cosmic rays. Hulk gamma rays. Like, he wasn't like, oh, they went up in a ship and everything. He's like, cosmic rays, gamma rays, bitten by radioactive spider, this, that, and the other, whatever. And it was kind of funny because the handful of kids that were really big into that stuff back then could solve debates, because when everybody's on the playground wanting to be superheroes, everybody wants to be Superman or Batman, right? And so it's like, well, you could be Superman, you could be Superboy, you could be Mon-El, you could be Bizarro, and you still have the same power set, and it's a variation on the theme, and booyah, fight was resolved before it even started.
I mean, you mentioned the Shazam t-shirt. And you're younger, everybody wanted to be Superman. Your background, for those of us who have video, podcast people, there's background photo, we have Batman, we have the Flash. We have a lot of DC things, right? Do you have something that you kind of leaned more towards when you were younger, or maybe something you lean more towards now? Or is it just a little bit of everything?
Um, like the big two always were like the thing. That was I remember being a kid and then watching like the Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby, Incredible Hulk series. And then I remember thinking, I'm like, God, he just got shot and he's bleeding. How'd that happen? Because in the comics, Hulk's like fighting the army. He's like got artillery shells hitting him. And he's just getting pissed off, So even back then, kind of like started to be sort of a stickler. The best way I kind of describe those worlds is if I wanted something more mythological and grandiose, I'd say go DC. They don't quantify how many tons Superman can lift. But Marvel can tell you that the Thing can do 85 tons, the Hulk can do 100, and that's before he even gets pissed off. So and what I also noticed too, it's like with DC, a lot of these characters didn't have a lot of real world issues to deal with. Like you never saw Clark Kent struggling to pay rent, but Peter Parker did.
Yeah.
He had to try to look after Aunt May, this, that, and the other. And it was like these people were having like some serious financial struggles. Like if you looked at like a lot of the DC characters, they weren't necessarily so Batman and a few others were well off, but a lot of them never had to worry about like money issues. And theoretically, if Superman was, even if he didn't have a regular job, he could, crush a lump of coal into a diamond and go, ding, go to a pawn shop. How much can I get for this?
$20. That doesn't look real.
Right. They seem to be the Marvel characters a little bit more flawed, and I felt like they were a little more grounded in that respect. It's funny. I remember back in the day before everybody knew that what Wolverine's real name was, and they went into the whole origin thing. He was just Logan, and they were like, "Is that first name or last name?" "Oh, it's just Logan." He was just like this mystery man, and you just didn't know, and he was just like this tough guy, and he was popular, and if he'd show up in any book, he'd show up in Power Pack, and suddenly that's like a $10 book. Like, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that was a common thing back in the day. Is your book not doing too well? Put Wolverine on the front.
Yeah.
Some sales.
Or Punisher. That was another one.
So actually, I think I seem to remember there was like a She-Hulk issue where that's the whole joke. And she, with that whole fourth wall breaking, is like, yeah, we're doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
But
I remember the one where she says, buy this book, I'm going to come into your house and tear up all your X-Men comics.
Oh, that John Byrne run on She-Hulk was amazing. I love that series. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, he did some great stuff. Like when he was, hitting his stride creatively. I mean, of course, the run with Claremont and X-Men was just outstanding. The Fantastic Four, when he rebooted like the post-crisis Superman with Man of Steel and moving forward there, and just he did a lot of great stuff. He did. I mean, I don't know what happened with him. I just know that I remember before I gained an appreciation for who was writing, who was drawing, and who was the behind the scenes stuff. I used to see his artwork a lot and go, oh, wow, that's very cool, because they had a lot of those posters with him, and it's like John Byrne, Kerry Gamble, trying to think of it was Keith Pollard, Dennis Cowan, Mark Bright. You had all these guys that you'd see them do so much, and you go, man, these guys are amazing,
Yeah, I still have fond memories. I've talked to Richard about this a little bit, just specifically stuff that he did. And I was always an Avengers guy, while all of my friends were X-Men guy, way back in the day before there was ever a hope of a decent movie being made about any of them.
Yeah.
But I loved his introduction on the West Coast Avengers of the Great Lakes Avengers. That's still one of my favorite insertions of stories. It's so incredibly ludicrous, but the art is crisp and the writing is fun. And it's just, kind of just a nice break from, the world is falling. Well, not really so much. We've got this pink dinosaur flying girl and a guy that's like Reed Richards, but only can be flat.
Mr. Immortal, who just kept getting killed over and over and over.
They actually have done some stuff with that character recently, which still makes me giggle a little bit. Oh, so it's lasted. Stuff's lasted.
Because you remember they came out with a title called the GLA.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh my God, like there's going to be some guy that wanders in a comic shop and the JLA is going to be the next part over. And he goes, oh, this looks like pretty good. And then gets home and he's like, wait a second. This isn't what I thought it was.
Squirrel Girl. What?
Yeah. And it's funny because and before Squirrel Girl, there was like, Speedball,
yes.
which was like that kind of hero. Nobody really took all that seriously. I mean, he had a pretty decent power set, but he just, bouncing around. I'm like, that's a product of the 80s. Like, that's cocaine.
Yeah. But do you remember when they tried to make him like gritty? When they it was a penance? Is that what what he was calling himself?
Yeah, and he was wearing a spiked outfit. And I'm like, he should be in a bondage club. He shouldn't be out fighting crime.
Okay, so do you remember you've seen MCU's Civil War? So the Captain America Civil War, right? So that Civil War storyline was based on the comics, and in the comics, the thing that started that Civil War storyline was a group called the New Warriors that were popular for a while and then just kind of weren't. And so they decided to say, well, they needed funding because their resident rich person couldn't fund them anymore. And so they decided to become a reality television show and chase down criminals, and they weren't paying attention and didn't let up. And one of them took out multiple blocks, including, school children. Well, Speedball is his whole thing is if you hit him, he's basically diverts kinetic energy in the opposite direction. So you can't really hurt him. He just flies around. But so they say, well, what if the explosion was so massive that it short-circuited his powers, and now he still has them, but he must experience pain, in a very lame metaphorical way about what he was partially responsible for to be able to create this energy again. It was terrible.
Yeah, I mean,
for penance. Okay.
And then the fact that they were like chasing down Nitro, it's like those guys were outclassed going after somebody like that. It's like, no, I mean, call the Avengers, just call somebody else. Don't try.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's interesting though, within the Marvel universe, you'll see a lot of when the New Warriors came out, they debuted in Thor.
Yep.
They were trying to fight Juggernaut, and you're like, nah, bro, you ain't gonna do that.
I really enjoyed that. That was during the Acts of Vengeance storyline, where we're going to trade. The villains are going to trade heroes because we always lose. So that won't happen if we trade. This random mysterious person said so. So we'll follow his instructions. It's bound to work.
Yeah. You later find out it was actually Loki the whole time.
Yeah.
Have you been keeping up with all of the shows and whatnot from Marvel, or do you keep up with there's a lot of, I think, really excellent animated stuff from DC. Like, do you keep up with all those things?
I try to, as budget permits and as time permits. I saw that Beware My Power, the Green Lantern animated feature, which I didn't think was bad. It just was a bit different as far as it kind of took what was a core of a story and sort of just went left. I mean, as I've gotten older, I've just had to kind of realize, like, you almost have to think of everything that they put out as being some sort of an Elseworld or a what if, because nobody's ever going to follow the actual continuity completely. It just doesn't work that way. No. Whether Hollywood dips their fingers in or the studio goes, oh, let's do this. It's like when they did Killing Joke. I mean, the fact that they had Batgirl and Batman sleeping together in the animated feature, like, that didn't happen in the books, but it was just something they wanted to throw in, sprinkle in for a little flavor, go, hey, let's make it saucy.
Yeah. Naughty.
But I like a lot of it. I do. There have been a few things. I remember watching Moon Knight, and I just thought they made him way too metaphysical in the beginning. It was almost too much. Like, he was Scarlet Scarab. We're doing like an incantation toward the end of it to bind the villain and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is like, you already made him a head case. It's like, you could have started with him as being just, that Merc turned vigilante redemptions thing and go from there. So I don't know what they would do with him next, because are they going to have him just keep fighting like Mystic Voided stuff, or will they just kind of get him grounded and have him like, busting heads on the street? I mean, it'd be fun. I mean, I know they were talking about doing Werewolf by Night, and that's kind of what that character spun out of, if I recall, out of the Moon Knight series.
Yeah,
so that could be fun. Yeah, that could be something fun to do. I mean, I always thought it was funny though that the guy Werewolf by Night, his name is Jack Russell.
Yep. Oh, so back in the day, when we were in college together, being the comic book nerds that we were, and enjoying the theatrical and games in general, we would combine this all and play the amazing Marvel role-playing game. And so you really could, when you say it's like, oh, you want to be Silver Surfer? Yeah, that's what we could do. One person could be whatever hero, but you can make your own hero. And all you had to remember was that that phase rip was the most important thing: fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intelligence, and psyche, all right there. You got your character, and unlike other character sheets, it was like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It was just kind of the strangest thing. What range are you going to be? So I always remembered that. I always enjoyed any stat that I could get into feeble 2. That's me all day long. That's the starting lowest level that you could get. But,
yeah. Like Aunt May's strength, like
just nothing you can. I have flight at feeble. It's like I can jump 4 feet.
Like
stay there for a second, then fall back down. So the reason I brought that up is just beyond the fact that it was fun.
Yeah.
Is that kind of sort of the thing that made you like the idea of doing improv, or did you just kind of get into that because you knew some people and wanted to try and do something different?
It's kind of funny. It all kind of cycles around, because when I was I remember being in middle school and doing theater, like local children's theater, and there was a group of kids that would be backstage, like we're in the dressing room, and if you don't have a lot of scenes and you've just got a minor role, you might be out there once or twice, and the rest of the time you're just backstage, or not backstage, but in the dressing room, just kind of hanging out. And there was a guy, a friend of mine named Paul, and I remember he had talked about Dungeons and Dragons and the TSR stuff, and he was like, oh, TSR, the superhero game. Like, what? And so next thing you know, there's a group of us, and we're playing one of the modules, and I think when the first big things we took on, I remember it was Octodroid, which is like a giant robot replica of Dr. Octopus.
Right.
But it was fun. I mean, and of course, yeah, the theatrical aspect is great with any kind of role playing. I mean, it definitely it brings together a lot of things I enjoy. I'm like, oh, like these elements of fantasy and comics and the role play stuff, because like you sit around and play games with a group of people, and you might have somebody playing a character named Tex. So all of a sudden your buddy that used to live down the halls, like, he's talking like this for the entirety of the game session because that's how his character sounds. And even though you're getting annoyed by it, you kind of have to give him kudos because he kept that accent going. He didn't have to, but he did. And then, of course, the next evolution of that was like going to live action role playing games, where it's like you dressing and acting as this person, and which was just a whole nother level. And so again, the theatrical aspect came in, and that, it was just a trip. It was fun. Only problem is when you were doing an accent for that long, sometimes you get stuck with it.
It's not such a bad thing unless you go into like Dr. Claw or something.
I'll get you, Gadget.
That was spot on.
Do that for like 2 hours, like,
yeah,
I can't talk.
You won't have a voice if you do that.
Right.
Oh, but that's it. It seems like it's kind of freeing being able to kind of ad lib. What kind of improv have you done?
I remember back when I was in, I think I was still in, maybe just getting into high school, and I'd taken dramatic improv with this British director named Colin Black, God rest his soul. It was very heavy, like dramatic improv. It was, it was all serious. It was like, we were calling forth scenes from mythology and a lot of really darker elements, which, I was ready. I was just like, I'm going to be ready for it eventually, So I just kind of rolled with it. And then as far as the comedic improv aspect, I actually auditioned, and this was like after college. There was a group called Nietzsche's Trailer Park that used to do, they do shows like Theater on the Square. And a lot of the people from that group were like former members of Comedy Sports and a couple other improv groups that were in India at the time. And so I linked up with them, and some of what we did was scripted, but there were some improvisational bits along the way. I had a blast, and we did a show like in the early 2000s. It was like, I remember it was the week of 9/11. And it was just like, holy smokes, there was a scene where I was playing this character with this very thick accent, and I had a turban. They were like, don't wear the turban. I was like, what? No, we don't want to disturb anybody. I said, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, 9/11 hit, and those guys wore turbans. I'm like, yeah. You knew what they wore? I said, really? Even then, when I was doing my accent, I said, it's not an Arabic accent. It's probably closer to like a Turkish or almost like a Kazakhstan kind of thing. I probably sounded more like Borat. But they were like, don't wear the turban, don't do it. I'm like, okay. So like I do this scene and I come walking out. So I'm just like, it changed the tone of it a little bit, but it's still kind of hidden so much as here I was, this foreign guy, and I'm talking about yes, I am go to Broadway Bill. I will have them Red Bull and vodka and listen to some mad beats. Yes, meet ladies for to have sex, and that was the brunt of it. It still hit. I'm like, okay, the turban was just extra. It wasn't a requirement. I'm like, and we were at least flexible enough in that respect. I just thought they were overacting. Like, I didn't think I was going to get beat up at the show or anything, didn't occur to me. I was just like, it was already part of the show.
You still keeping up with that right now?
Now, like the Nietzsche's Trailer Park, I did like the one series of shows with them. And after that, they had started to reform. And then even though I was in the cast, they were like wanting me to come audition again. And I was just like, really? Okay. I thought I was in the cast, but okay. I came and auditioned. And then next thing you know, like it all just kind of fell apart from what I had heard. So I just didn't think much of it. But now since then, and this is in more recent years, probably it was 2018. I had started taking some improv workshops down in Indianapolis with Peter Spellos. He's like a great character actor, voice actor. He's been in the game for like 40 years, and he's very insightful. And so I started doing these workshops on like the weekends, like a Saturday, a Sunday, and just doing like once a month. And it just kind of got me back into acting, because at the time I was in a funk. I was just very depressed and just dealing with a lot of loss. And I do remember acting being one of the things I enjoyed and one of the things I loved. And I had not done improv like proper in a long time. So I thought, you know what, if I take the workshop and I'm not into it, I'm not feeling it, I'm done with acting. And that was the literal agenda I had going into it. I'm like, this is either going to jumpstart the game or I'm done. And I really dug it, had a blast. And then next thing you know, like, he was like, kid, you got the chops. He goes, we're doing a show at PopCon. We're going to need a couple more people. You want in? I'm like, sure. So next thing you know, boom, there I was doing PopCon Indie. And I'm like, oh my God. Had a blast, man, like there's
has a nice following of people that attend each year.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty well run. I mean, because I've been to some shows where it's like, and I'm not going to name drop what show it was, but I went to a convention, and like they always have panels and things. Sometimes it'll be about cosplay, or it'll be about fans of whatever the TV show of the day is that's really popular, whatever's trending. And they had a panel that was going to be about diversity and inclusion in comics. I'm like, that looks like an interesting workshop. I'm gonna go check that out. Went in there, sat down, and it's like this bunch of people in there, and everybody on the panel is a bunch of white dudes. I was like, what's going on here? It's like, do you remember a couple years ago, like these there were I think it was even on C-SPAN. These people making fun of it. There was a health symposium, like a women's health symposium, and they had a panel. It was all male doctors, and everybody was like, this is something's missing here. You know, that's kind of what it felt like too. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, God, I know they were like, you could have snagged a couple black dudes from Artist Alley, grab a woman or two, some of these female artists, writers. I mean, come on, you know, but I guess it just didn't occur to them at the time. You know,
best of intentions, hopefully.
I'd like to think so.
Diversity. It was a street a couple blocks over.
Yeah.
Oh man. So how, okay, I have to ask about that particular panel. Did you stay for the whole thing?
No, I got him on the left. I'm like,
okay. I was going to ask how long it took to just kind of nosedive.
It was funny because like I remember I walked out and like I saw as I was walking out, this black dude was walking in. He looks and goes, "Are you shitting me?" I'm like, "Yeah." Back to exhibit hall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like I mean, I've been to a good number of shows, like some of the bigger ones, and even some of the small scale ones. And I think it's funny, like there was one of the shows I was at in Logansport. And it was, well, you know, they got Fiberglass Freaks in Logansport. They do they're licensed to do the replicas of the 66 Batman.
Oh,
Batman
right.
And so they would have it on display in the mall, and they had all these vendors and some creators that were there with their wares. I think the biggest name of the show at that time, I mean, aside from like the Bat stuff, I mean, you had like Mark Waid there, which was really cool. Ooh. And it was cool to just kind of, because I'd met him a couple of times. Just I'd ran into him at like one of the Ash Comics shows. Do you remember those down in Indianapolis?
Yes.
And I just happened to run into him by happenstance, and I was just kind of like, I'm looking over, and this guy's like looking through the back issues and next thing over, and I'm like, "Excuse me." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Are you Mark Waid?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Hey man, I dig your work," and we talked a little bit, and it was cool. And I ended up buying a couple of books because I think at the time he was doing Spider-Man for Marvel. And I said, "Would it be all right if I said, I don't want to bother you, but I said, could I get an autograph?" "Yeah, no problem, man." And signed off on it. Gave me a smile. You were cool, you know. And I talked to him probably a few other times since then, you know. But I remember this is around the time New 52 was jumping off at this show in Logansport. And a lot of people are asking all these different questions about, and they had all these like one of the things was like a Q&A. And so I actually, I think it was, I had asked him, I said, "What do you think of this whole New 52 thing?" I said, "It's drastically different in certain respects." Because what I thought was interesting is they kind of left themselves a way out, because the Batman mythology and the Green Lantern mythology both were still intact, yeah. They said. So all that history had not been negated for them. So I thought, well, with that said, that presents an anomaly that some time traveling character can exploit at some point. It would probably happen if it didn't go over. But I said, I'm really not feeling it. He says, "Well, I don't think I'm the target demographic for that particular launch, you know, because they were trying to, I guess, appeal to a younger audience, a fresher crowd. And really, it just felt like they were doing their impression of Image Comics in the 90s.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, not there's anything wrong with it, but if it ain't broke, you know.
No, it's kind of funny. You were talking about the who's who and the Marvel Universe. To me, that's the answer. You know, they're always afraid to, when they're bringing in new people, that they're not going to want to get into it because, you know, there's so much history already and it's impossible to catch up. No, it's not. You make a who's who and a Marvel Universe, and you make them cheap. And then, you know, you don't even really need that now with the internet. You know, they've got their own websites. Just put the basic history there and you're caught up in 5 minutes. Jump right in.
I mean, FanWiki or whatever. I mean, there's so many of those. And what I thought was interesting, like having watched the She-Hulk series, have you guys seen it so far?
I am current as of this recording.
Okay, same here. And I remember seeing some of the characters in the trailer, and they had a guy that looked like a Power Ranger character in one of the first trailers, and I found out I was supposed to be Frogman.
Oh.
And I was just like, "What, the Fabulous Frogman? They're bringing him in? Are you serious?" Oh my God! Like the little like 10-year-old geek in me that remembers buying the Marvel team up where him and
Right.
Spidey are taking on like the White Rabbit, was just like, oh my God, dude, really?
If that's the case, maybe there's some hope we'll see like Razorback or something.
Yeah. I mean,
No,
why
just-
not just
I was
somebody
excited the Wrecking Crew showed up,
Yes.
even though it was really cheesy, but that's kind of the point,
I mean, I made a meme about it, and I've seen it kind of getting shared around where I basically said, is this the Wrecking Crew or is this the New Village people? Because these guys, they were like these sort of like mousy construction guys. I'm like, they don't look like proper construction guys. They just, I mean, if you're going to go that route, I mean, I remember sort of reading some of the rumors and things about the She-Hulk series before it came out. And one of the stories was that they were going to end up getting gamma powered, and that's how they ended up being, the big buff crazy guys that they were like in the comics. But it's like, no,
I'll do that.
The close that they did at least kind of acknowledge that they all had what was the Asgardian weaponry.
Right.
So it's like, okay, they had that. I'm like, because that's how the Wrecker, had the magic crowbar and everything. But I mean,
Yep.
he had the Norn stones from Carnilla, and that's what gave him his abilities. And he decides to use a crowbar and share with his buddies. So I mean, they could still conceivably get that back on track and make them bigger menaces. Whether they will, I don't know. I mean, I'm just enjoying it for what it is, and I'm glad to see Tim Roth again.
Yes.
He's such a great actor. Like, the whole, like the Abomination thing, and the fact that they've, in the time that he hasn't been seen, they evolved him.
Yeah.
He looks a little more like the comic counterpart, because originally he just looked like Doomsday on crack.
Yeah. I am of the opinion and of the hope that they will be bringing in the leader in a similar kind of slight reinterpretation, because it just seems like it's going that direction.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
I mean, especially when you have a character that's, She-Hulk is essentially a Hulk spinoff. She's tethered to him because they're common with the gamma rays and everything. It's kind of like, if you like when you watch a Supergirl, Lex Luthor turns out to be one of the big antagonists. A lot of Superman's rogues were coming after her, and it works, because I mean, really, it's like, oh, if I couldn't beat up Superman, maybe I could beat up his cousin. It's like, good luck with that.
Nope. And I have to admit, the outfit was kind of crazy, but even if it was for just a split second, getting to see Titania with Jamil Al-Jamil as that part, I kind of marked out for that. I was like, yeah. But will we get to see the Absorbing Man? I want to see those two together, because that's the fun.
I mean, they had him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right. And he was good. The actor they got was great. The writing on it was solid. We can hope.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, he was cool.
But the Wrecking Crew were basically just jobbers. If you ever needed a villain to lose to a hero, they need to be powerful enough to be a threat, kind of, but easy enough to beat. That's who you got. They were the Brooklyn Brawler of the comics world. It's amazing the kind of the cross similarities between comics and wrestling. And maybe that's why I love both. I mean, you love both, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, like I got out of wrestling when I was a kid. I was all about it. I had like the AWA and NWA figures. I had like the WWF and had the big ring and all that. And then they reached a certain point in the 90s, and I think it was right around the time, well, it had to be like early 90s, because everybody had mullets. Like they did one of the World Rumbles, and everybody that came to ringside running down had a mullet flying behind them.
Yeah.
And I think even Coco Beware had like a Jericho mullet. So it's like Jerry Juice and mullet. The black mullet was just flying in behind him. He's probably dousing that poor was that a parrot he had? I can't remember.
Macaw or something.
Yeah, he had some kind of tropical bird. I was like, okay. They had some pretty quirky characters back in the day, and I did find myself finding some of those pretty hilarious. You remember a guy named Michael Saxon?
I do remember Michael.
He'd come out with if he didn't have a Thriller jacket on, he'd have like the sparkly drum major type Michael Jackson vibe going, and just proceed to just get beaten like mercilessly. I'm like, man,
I always loved the acts that were just north of the ones that got beat like that. So you get like Hercules back in the day on his own, never really did really well. And Paul
Mhm.
Roma, kind of the same way, but put him in a tag team, Power and Glory. They kind of did a little something.
Yeah.
And it was a joy to watch that sort of thing happen.
What's funny is since I started doing the announcing for AACW, I'm because I just came on as announcer initially, and then I am getting sort of bumped up to being president later on, and just having conversations with some of the other wrestlers. Because like I stopped watching, and I didn't like dislike it. It just became one of those things. I'm like, I went full tilt into like gaming and a lot of other stuff. So the wrestling just fell the wayside. It's not like I dislike it, but it was one of those things. Every once in a while, if I see it on, I might watch some. It's kind of like it was like the Highlander TV series. Like I was all about that when it came out, but it hasn't been on TV in years. But if I saw something like, or if I saw in the movies, or if I saw, if something pops in my news feed on YouTube or somewhere else, I'm like, oh my God, and kind of go down memory lane. I'm like, I enjoy this. I remember this. And it's interesting to talk to some of the wrestlers, and, you can see who's influencing who. Like there's a guy I talked to, I think Zane West, and he's one of the indie wrestlers, and he does AACW and a few other travels around a bit. And he had sort of like this sort of cowboy vibe about him. So the good old boy energy. And I said, we were talking Messenger one time, and I said, you got that whole Stan the Lariat Hansen vibe. And he was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, you get it. I'm like, I totally get it, because, I remember the old school stuff. I was into it. So I'm bringing that forward, because like, I don't know a whole lot about Roman Reigns and, the Miz and all this whole wave of like the buffed up roided dudes. But I remember some of those guys, like Terry Funk. Holy smoke, man. Those guys were like Harley Race, Junkyard Dog. Some of those dudes were just beasts in the ring,
What does your role as president, like, tell me a little bit about what that entails?
Okay, well, I'm still doing announcing. I've got another announcer there, Shane Timmons. He's got a show called Shooting with Shane, SWS, and he's been getting a bit more active into like some of the ring stuff, because he's got a son that wrestles. And so for me, it's like, for a time there, I didn't have anybody to banter with, so I'm just kind of giving a play-by-play. But with have somebody there to kind of talk to and banter with, that improves. I feel like that adds more to the ambiance of the announcing,
Yeah.
And so it's like I've been doing that. And then like the fact you've got a lot of guys that just have beef with each other, and they want to just beat each other to death. But like, oh, we need you to sign up on the match. We need your approval, Mr. President. I'm like, okay. And sometimes I got to check people because they get a little bit out of line. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Or, oh, we're going to do this. Or like, oh, you can get a title shot when you've earned it. And sometimes the dudes get pissed, but that's just the way it is. I mean, you can't just get run over. I mean, and I'm trying to not get into that position where I end up sort of I don't feel like getting tossed around the ring myself. So I'm like, I'm definitely playing the more administrative end of it. And I've talked to a lot of people after the show. Some folks will come and go, oh, it's a really great show. Or I like this, or I like that. Or, if we're doing giveaways, some of the kids will come up and they'll ask me stuff. I'm just taking selfies of people. I'm like, really? Okay. I'm like, I came in the ring and just kind of said hi to everybody and did a little bit of, sort of an introduction at the beginning of the show. Shane and I'll do that. But, as far as me really getting down and like getting in the squared circle and knuckling up with these dudes, I haven't done it. I keep getting people asking me though. And it's tempting. It really is, because, I used to do martial arts and I used to do wrestling in high school. And, so I had moments where I was just like, you know what, maybe someday, but I'm going to have to go some training first. I'm not just going to go dive into like a maniac. I'm like, nah, don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy in a suit getting suplexed,
We got to get you down to the power plant, brother.
Yeah. Oh man. It's like, it's interesting because, one of the other things I didn't realize until I got into the indie wrestling circuit, as far as, doing the shows, ring rats are a thing. I didn't even know about this whole phenomenon until like there were some of these girls who were just acting crazy. Like, you know, some guy coming down the ringside and they're like, ah! And they're freaking out and they're twerking and they're like, you know, trying to reach out and grab on the wrestlers and just, you know, and it's funny. I'm just like, wow, they got groupies. You know, I mean,
It's a strange
like,
world.
yeah. I mean, you get the guys that are coming to the show to watch dudes like beat each other up and it's all testosterone and tough guy type shit, you know. And then you've got the ring rats and they're just like getting hot and bothered watching these dudes slam each other around, you know. I thought it was interesting though to watch the crowd's reaction to some of these folks, because, you know, when it's an independent circuit, not everybody knows who everyone is. So, you know, we announce somebody and they come out. It all depends on maybe their theme music gets people pumped up, or maybe if they come out and go, "You guys suck." All right, this guy's the heel. We're gonna boo this guy. But if somebody comes out, it's like there was a guy like there was one of the wrestlers, like one of them has a wore mask, like Liberty Kid. He comes out and it's like he's playing real Americans. Well, hell, Hulk Hogan ain't using it, right? He comes out to ringside and he's like, "Yeah," and the crowd like they get hyped up and he's running around high fiving the kids. And okay, like this, you should probably be cheering for this guy. The dude that comes out who either if he doesn't like get salty with the crowd, or if he's walking by and people are trying to touch him, he just like shoots him a death glare. He's like, "Yeah, shut up," you know, like, okay, that's the bad guy. And that's where you see the big differentiation as far as the you know with the indie circuit goes. But it is fun. There's a certain level of unpredictability. I've seen a couple times from matches where just like they didn't make it in the ring. They just were just fighting. I'm like, dude, this is like being in a bar. You know, like when I was after I'd moved back to Kokomo, Indianapolis, I remember going to there was a BW3s in town, and that was a place everybody was going and hanging out. You know, they were having some drinks and kicking, and they'd show the like the pay-per-view events. So I'm like, all right, cool, I'll go to that. And then it's like half the time people were so rowdy in there, you didn't get to watch the pay-per-view on the big screen because you see some dude getting the snot beat out of him in front of everybody else. You know, I was just like, wow, this is like, God, it's like
are you saying that some of the individuals on the independent circuit don't quite know when to let it go?
No, I'm just saying the guys that are drunk
at
BW3s, it turns into like Rocky Horror, like, oh, these guys are getting beat up on the screen and this guy's over here getting beat up in real life. Wow. It becomes this sort of like, you know, art imitating life.
I know I've on occasion wanted to put somebody in a hammerlock. It just happens.
Oh yeah.
Tell me if you participate in the logistical side of it, but like I'm kind of curious too, like setting up these independent matches. Like you have to have a place, you have to have concessions sometimes, or selling merchandise, or you have to have security, or you have to pay for whatever. Like tell me a little bit about the logistical stuff about setting these things up.
Well, initially going into it, the guy who actually runs AACW, and I believe their Facebook's AACW Old School Lives, that's the sensibility that he wants to bring to it. Shane Cowser, and he used to wrestle under the name J.H. Hogg, and I think he's actually going to be making a comeback next month. But one of the things was that was the issue of finding a venue. Like I guess a few years ago, they were at a nightclub, Front Row Live, where they would do the shows, and so you had the bar, you had your, you know, so people who, if they wanted, they could go in there, get a cocktail, or just get some wings or whatever it was they wanted while they watched these guys, you know, go to town. And they ended up changing venues. So I think the club had changed hands, and they were at the Alliance Event Center in Kokomo for a time. And that was what used to be a crisis center. It was like a former bingo hall. And then the other side of it was where Paradigm Comics was. So it's like, you know, you had, I mean, it was a pretty sizable building. And so it was big enough that they could put the ring in there and get set up. And they did have concessions because the venue itself, they had, you know, they had stuff there that they were already selling when they would have events and things, because people were having birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, and all other kinds of things like proms and stuff there. So there was already sort of a built-in thing there. So that wasn't something that we had to really worry about. It was just a matter of us getting like getting the wrestlers in there and get the ring up and getting butts in seats, as they say. What was funny though, with Alliance, it was a great venue, but the ceilings weren't high enough. So the wrestlers really couldn't get on the top rope. Like, some of them are high flyers. Like that's their bread and butter. So all of a sudden, these dudes, it's like, I remember one of the shows, it's like, this was a match between these two guys and they're going back and forth. I mean, and it was just like, oh, man, intense. And one of the guys jumps up on the top rope and he kind of forgets because he was just caught up in it. And he jumps up and busts the ceiling tile when he comes down. He still lands on the guy. So all this shit, like particle board, blasters coming down, like, oh my God.
It's carnage.
Yeah. And then I think one of the dudes grabbed a piece of it, just like bop the guy with it, Another crazy event or incident that happened at Alliance was we had a anything goes match, and I think it was Brody Bodkins and Christian Cash were the two guys going at each other, and people could bring in weapons, but not like no guns or knives, but you could bring in like a broom, pipes, baseball bats, and hockey, like the hockey stick. Somebody brought in a hockey stick, tennis rackets. Like people brought in all kinds of crazy stuff. There was some little old lady who was like waving a pot in a pan. She's like, get him, hit him at this, And some of them had like the sheets you cook stuff on, like a cookie sheet. And somebody's wham, these guys just wailing on each other. And people were throwing stuff into the ring. And then at one point, a dildo rolls into the middle of the ring. And there was this moment where it's like, the wrestlers, he was like wailing the other guy, and they both kind of stopped and looked down. There's this, black rubber dong rolling across the thing. And the guy just was like, they just kick it out of the way and just kept going. And I was like, oh my God, dude, like who thought that bringing
like a blackjack?
Yeah. Like, he probably could concuss somebody with that. You hit somebody hard enough with a rubber dong, they're probably going to go down. So. But at the same token, do you want to handle it? It could be used. It's like you would hope it's new. You just don't even have to deal with it.
That's the smart move. Get it out of the way. You land on that wrong, you're going to hurt a nerve in your back or something. It's just not going to happen.
But I mean, right now they've got a bigger venue. It's Carver Community Center in Kokomo, and it's like the Carver has like a couple of basketball courts there, so they've got the high enough ceilings. These dudes are jumping off the ropes, they're jumping out of the rings on each other, and it's a lot better venue. And Carver, because they already do sporting events and things there, they have concessions and whatnot built in, so that's just something we don't have to worry about logistically. Now, as far as merch, there are a few wrestlers that have merch. They'll come there and they might set up a table, or during the intermission that we have, and they'll go out there and pimp whatever wares they have, because I guess there's companies that you can make. Do you remember when they used to have the wrestling buddies, and they were like the little stuffed, the replicas of the wrestlers? Like you can actually get those made in any likeness. So there was a couple of indie wrestlers that did that, and some of the guys had t-shirts and things. So they had some wares that they could pimp. And then of course they had it set up where if somebody wanted to get vendor space there, they could, so if somebody wanted to, they had t-shirts and things that they were trying to sell, they could totally just get some space there and pimp that out. And and we're just kind of freed up like that, and it's very cool because the less we have to worry about, is there enough popcorn, or or if there are enough nachos. Because I remember one time we were one of the shows, and they ran out of nachos, and people are coming up to me going, "Hey man, where's the nachos?" I said, you just go up in line, right? There should be some nachos. No man, they're out of nachos. What the hell are you gonna do about it? I'm like,
nothing.
The show must go on. I would like to think in my heart of hearts that you didn't come to this damn wrestling show just for the nachos. I could be wrong.
Those small venues are some of the good stuff. I mean, you hear some just excellent independent stories. I mean, and if
Mhm.
the independents do well enough, they can even, you know, rise to levels like ECW eventually did. And there's just there's a certain, I don't know, just a certain ambiance to it. You know, guys are trying to make something happen before, you know, get their name out there, get noticed, and put on a show. That's where you can see some truly amazing stuff.
Oh yeah.
Do you think a lot of the folks that have kind of participated in the past, participating now, do you think their hopes are ultimately to go into something bigger, or is it just like, we love what we're doing and we're happy with that we actually have the opportunity to do this?
I've noticed there are a lot of guys, they're not so much focused on going, well, I'm gonna get an ECW, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna do that. They're just like, hey, there's a show coming up in Crawfordsville like next month. I'm gonna try to get on the card there. Oh, you know, Marion, they're doing a show every other month. I'm gonna try to go to that. So more than anything, it's just like, I mean, like, it's like with anything, it's like networking, but a lot of these guys just want to get out there and just do the craft. They just want to, you know, they want to get in the thick of it, and that's great, you know. There's, I think, I mean, of course, on some level, you want to blow up and get big and do all this crazy cool stuff. That's, you know, that's the idea. But then there's some of these guys, you know, like they're a little bit older, and so they, you know, from what I've seen, a lot of these companies that are like kind of mainstreaming now aren't necessarily big on older wrestlers,
Right.
you know, and it's too bad. I mean, because, you know, when I was growing up, you had some of the older cats that were still wrestling. I mean, Bruno Sammartino was like an older dude, and he was keeping up with some of those guys. I mean, you had
Bob Backlund kept going.
Hmm?
Bob Backlund kept going.
Yeah, I mean, Harley Race had some age on him when he was doing his thing. I mean, there were a lot of guys that just, you know, they just kept going. That was just their thing. That was what they wanted to do. That was the life. And, you know, kudos to them for it, because I had a neighbor that retired, and I remember after like about a week of him sitting on the porch, he was just like, one day I'm sitting on my porch, he's sitting on his, he goes, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm all right." I said, "How are you enjoying your retirement?" He goes, "It sucks." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I can't like not do anything." He goes, "I think I'm going to get a part-time job just to have something to do, because this is driving me crazy." So, you know,
Yeah.
Sharks like to keep swimming.
Makes sense.
I
to
get
me.
it.
That's the way we are, always moving forward.
Yeah.
No, not really, but we're sitting still right here. We're happy on our chairs. Don't move us. But I have to say, it has been fantastic hearing about some of the stuff that you have been up to since we have really hung out regularly. And do you have any of these things that you would like to advertise that are going to be coming up, so that people know where to find you and see what you're going to be doing?
Sure. The next wrestling show, it'll be at Carver Community Center in Kokomo, and it'll be the second Saturday of October, which I believe, let me check the date real quick. Look at the friendly, handy dandy calendar here. Let's see, October, so second weekend, I think it'll be, if it's not, it should be the 15th actually, which actually would be technically falling the 3rd, but I do believe it's the 15th of this next show, and the doors open at about 6:30, and the show normally jumps off around 7. And I mean, we've got a lot of tag team matches, some battle royals set up, some championships on the line. So that's going to be a fun show to check out. You can also look on AACW Old School Lives on Facebook for more information, and figure out who you want to root for ahead of time if you like, or antagonize them. We've had some guys that are like that. I've had some people like go on there and go, "You guys, this person sucks. I don't like this wrestler." I'm like, well, then when you come to the show, make sure to boo at him. Let him know. You can bring signs if you like, you know. I'm still creating content for Amos Cola, formerly known as Amos Magazine. It's Amos, AMOS-Cola, COLA.com. I've got some prose, some poetry, a little bit of photography, some flash fiction, and a lot of the fiction I write is I use public domain characters. I even have continuations of some stories featuring the characters from the Six Emperors comic book that I co-wrote with James McCord. and Sterling Clark was our artist for it. So I decided to make like 6 stories featuring like solo adventures of the characters. And then I've got another character named Dr. Omega, which predates Doctor Who, but it's basically the same concept. But my variation is his companion is Calamity Jane from the Wild West. And he is a black man. He's time traveling. And it's kind of funny because I came out with my version of Dr. Omega a few years ago. And then when I saw Ncuti Gatwa got cast in the role, I'm like, I'm going to write down, I win $10 billion. I'm going to write that down right now. And hopefully it'll happen in a year or two. That'll be great. So you can check out my work there. You can always look me up on I got a channel on YouTube. If you just type in Leonard Pigg, you'll find some of the stand-up I've done. I got some YouTube shorts where I try to be funny, and sometimes it works. I talk a little about the comic industry and a few other things. I had a couple videos where I talk about Doctor Who. So you can check me out there. I'm on Facebook. I mean, there are not very many Leonard Piggs, and it's just not a common name. So it's like Luthor and Metropolis. It's just very, very rare, but it's there. So
plus you're very one of a kind to begin with. Why should anyone try and imitate that? It's no need. It's the role is filled, is being done well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the program and sharing some stories with us, sharing some time, and we'll definitely have to have you on again when you've got some other cool stuff coming up, ready to plug, and or if you just want to make fun of some movies or comic books.
That sounds like a plan. Thanks for the invite. I had a blast.
Excellent. Thank you again.